Marcus Thorne returned to the city that had birthed him, a place he hadn't seen in a decade. The skyline, a familiar jagged line of ambition and steel, did nothing to warm the chill that had settled deep in his bones. He wasn't here for business, though his empire of tech and logistics churned on without him. He was here because of a letter, a single creased page from his late sister Elena, sent by her lawyer a year after her death, as per her instructions. "Look after my Leo," it had pleaded. "Don't trust Gregory. Please, Marcus." The drive to the suburbs was a journey through a past he had systematically paved over with success and distance. Each manicured lawn and picket fence felt like a quiet accusation. He had been absent, building a fortress of wealth while his only family fractured. Elena had married Gregory shortly after Marcus left the country, a whirlwind romance he'd only witnessed through glossy photographs. In every picture, Gregory's smile was a little too wide, his hand a little too tight on Elena's shoulder. Marcus had dismissed it as the cynicism of a man who'd seen the worst of the world in his former life, long before the boardrooms and stock tickers. Now, his sister's posthumous warning echoed in the silent, air-conditioned hum of his Maybach. He pulled up to the house. It was exactly as he remembered from the photos, a pristine two-story colonial with a perfectly green lawn and blooming rose bushes lining the walkway. But something was wrong. It was a sterile perfection, like a model home. No toys scattered on the grass, no bicycle leaning against the porch. The silence was too heavy, too absolute for a home with a 6-year-old boy. A knot of unease, a familiar ghost from his days in special operations, tightened in his gut. This was the stillness of a place holding its breath. He got out of the car, the expensive leather of his shoes making no sound on the immaculate flagstone path. The front door was a cheerful red, but the brass knocker was tarnished, an almost imperceptible flaw in the otherwise flawless facade. He reached for the doorbell, his hand hesitating as a faint, rhythmic sound reached him, a scraping, a thud, a scraping. It was coming from the side of the house near the back. He lowered his hand, his entire focus shifting from the front door to the source of that desolate, lonely sound. The billionaire returned to his sister's home after a decade away, only to be paralyzed by the sight of his young nephew in a horrific situation. Gregory, the boy's stepfather, answered the door with a smile as polished as the silverware in his dining room, insisting the child was simply under the weather. Why would a child be caged like an animal in his own mother's house? And who truly deserved to be brought into the light? Marcus followed the scraping sound around the side of the house, his polished shoes crunching softly on the gravel path that led to the backyard. The perfect lawn gave way to an overgrown, neglected patch of earth behind a tall wooden fence. The gate was secured with a heavy, rust-flecked padlock. Marcus's jaw tightened. Through the slats, he could see him. A small boy, his nephew Leo, with Elena's dark, curly hair, now matted with dirt. He was skeletal. The boy's ribs were stark, visible ridges beneath a tattered t-shirt that hung from his tiny frame like a shroud. He was on his hands and knees, methodically dragging a large flat stone across the dirt, his face a mask of vacant concentration. Scrape, thud, scrape, thud. Marcus's blood ran cold. The air left his lungs in a silent rush. This was not a child playing. This was a prisoner engaged in a meaningless, repetitive task. His heart clenched into a fist of ice and fire. He rattled the gate. "Leo!" The boy flinched violently, scrambling backward into the corner of the fenced-in patch of dirt, pulling his knees to his chest. He didn't make a sound, but his eyes, huge and dark in his gaunt face, screamed a terror that Marcus recognized instantly. It was the look of someone who knew that being noticed was the most dangerous thing in the world. For a moment, Marcus was no longer a billionaire in a bespoke suit. He was back in a dusty, sun-scorched village, looking at a child who had seen too much. He took a steadying breath, forcing the rage down, banking it like a furnace. He would need it later. Right now, the boy needed calm. He heard the back door of the house slide open. "Can I help you?" a smooth voice called out. "Gregory." He emerged onto the patio, holding a glass of iced tea, the picture of suburban ease. He was handsome, with a politician's smile and confident posture. "Ah, you must be Marcus. Elena told me so much about you. I wasn't expecting you." His eyes flickered to the gate, then back to Marcus, the smile never wavering. Just doing a bit of yard work. Leo's helping me clear the rocks. Good for building character. Marcus's gaze remained locked on the small, trembling figure huddled in the dirt. He saw the raw, red skin on Leo's knees, the hollows of his cheeks, the tremor in his tiny hands. Building character. The words were a vile poison. In that instant, a silent, unbreakable vow formed in the core of Marcus's being. I will get you out of here, Leo. I will keep you safe, and he will pay for this. The vow was cold, absolute, and as solid as the fortune he had built. He turned his attention back to Gregory, his own face an impassive mask. He had learned long ago to hide his intentions behind a wall of stillness. I came to see my nephew, Marcus said, his voice level, devoid of the fury churning within him. Elena's letter. It just arrived. It was her wish that I check on him. Gregory's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Her letter? Ah, yes. Elena was always a worrier. He gestured vaguely toward the boy. He's been having some health issues, I'm afraid. A rather severe eating disorder, the doctors think. We're trying everything. Fresh air, simple tasks to keep his mind occupied. He gets withdrawn. Sometimes he won't even come inside. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it was almost believable. Gregory's expression was a perfect symphony of concerned stepfatherly duty. He was gaslighting Marcus with the casual ease of a seasoned manipulator. What doctors? Marcus asked, the question sharp and direct. Dr. Alistair Finch, a top specialist, Gregory replied without hesitation, taking a sip of his tea. It's a very delicate situation. We don't want to overwhelm him. In fact, your sudden appearance might be a bit of a shock to his system. He walked to the gate and fumbled with a key from his pocket. Let's go inside and talk. I'll bring Leo in a bit once he's finished his task. The condescension was subtle, a layer of silk over a blade of steel. He was dismissing Marcus, treating him like an unwelcome interruption to a carefully managed routine of care. Marcus knew then that this would not be a simple rescue. It would be a war. He comes with me now, Marcus stated. It wasn't a request. Gregory's affable mask tightened. I don't think that's a good idea. He's fragile. He looks starved, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous timbre, and I'm not leaving him here. For a moment, the two men stood in a silent standoff, the air thick with unspoken violence. Gregory, for all his polished confidence, was a man accustomed to intimidating the weak. He was not prepared for the granite stillness of a man like Marcus Thorne. He saw something in Marcus's eyes, a complete lack of fear and an infinite capacity for action that made him take a half-step back. He reluctantly unlocked the gate. Marcus entered the filthy enclosure and knelt before Leo. He didn't reach for him. He simply knelt, making himself smaller, less threatening. Leo, he said softly, I'm your uncle, Marcus. Your mom was my sister. I'm going to take you somewhere safe. The boy just stared, his small body rigid with fear. Marcus slowly took off his $1,000 suit jacket and draped it over Leo's shaking shoulders. The boy flinched but didn't pull away. Gently, Marcus scooped him up. He was terrifyingly light, like a bird with hollow bones. The smell of dirt and neglect clung to him. Without another glance at Gregory, Marcus carried his nephew to the front of the house and secured him in the plush leather back seat of the Maybach. He drove not to a hotel, but to a sprawling penthouse he kept, a sterile, empty space he rarely used. He ran a warm bath for Leo, who stood passively, a little soldier accustomed to following orders. As Marcus gently washed the grime away, he saw the full extent of the horror. Bruises, old and new, mottled the boy's pale skin in shades of yellow and purple. His spine was a sharp, knobby ridge. After the bath, wrapped in the plushest towel Marcus owned, Leo was given a simple meal of broth and soft bread. He ate, slowly, mechanically, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting to be punished for the indulgence. Later, as Leo slept a fitful, whimpering sleep on a mountain of pillows, Marcus began his work. He didn't call the police. Not yet. Gregory's lie about a doctor and an eating disorder was a clever defense. Marcus needed proof, something undeniable. His first call was to a number he hadn't dialed in years. An old woman's voice, frail but sharp, answered on the third ring. Mrs. Gable? Who's asking? She snapped. Marcus Thorne, Elena's brother. There was a long silence. "I was wondering if you'd ever show up," she finally said, her voice laced with a mixture of relief and accusation. "That poor child." "Tell me everything, Mrs. Gable," Marcus said. "Don't leave anything out." "I don't like to meddle," Mrs. Gable began, her voice a reedy whisper over the phone. "But what's been happening over there? It isn't right. Not since Elena passed." She lived in the house directly behind, her kitchen window overlooking their backyard. She was the reluctant witness, afraid of Gregory's smooth temper and his veiled threats about nosy neighbors. "After the funeral," she continued, "the boy just disappeared. Gregory told everyone who asked that he'd sent him to a special boarding school for grieving children, a fancy place upstate. But then a few months ago I saw him, in that pen in the back. At first I thought he was just playing, but it was every day, rain or shine, for hours. Gregory would bring him a single slice of bread and a glass of water at noon. Sometimes, if the boy was crying, he wouldn't get anything at all." Her voice cracked with emotion. "I saw him, Mr. Thorne. I saw him get so thin, I wanted to call someone, but Gregory, he came over one day, said he noticed me watching. He said it was a shame how easily old people can have accidents. He smiled when he said it." Marcus's knuckles were white as he gripped the phone. "Did you ever see anyone else there? A doctor? Nannies?" "Never. Just Gregory. And his lady friends, always laughing and having parties on the patio while that little boy was locked in the back, starving." The next piece came from a hunch. Elena had been meticulous, a planner. In her final letter she'd written, "The key to everything is with the angels." It sounded like a poetic flourish, but Marcus knew his sister. It was a code. He hired a discreet security team to sweep Gregory's house while he was out, a simple matter for a man with Marcus's resources. He gave them specific instructions. They found it in the attic, inside a box labeled Christmas ornaments. Taped to the back of a porcelain angel was a small silver key and a folded piece of paper. The key opened a locked drawer in Elena's old vanity, a piece of furniture Gregory had shoved into a corner of the guest room. Inside was a diary. Elena's diary. The last few months of her life were detailed in shaky handwriting. She wrote of Gregory's growing cruelty, his control over her finances, his coldness toward Leo. The final entry was chilling. "He knows I'm sick. He's waiting for me to die. He told me Leo is too thin, too weak to be of any use. He called my son an investment that didn't pay off. I'm so scared for my boy. I bought a small camera, a little bear. I put it in Leo's room. I don't know if I'll have the strength to see what it records." The security team found the teddy bear. It was sitting on a shelf in Leo's bedroom, its plastic eye a tiny wide-angle lens. The SD card was still inside. Marcus sat in the dark of his penthouse, the city lights glittering far below, and watched the footage. It was hours of silent, heartbreaking testimony. Gregory entering the room, yanking Leo out of bed. Gregory screaming at the boy for not finishing a chore, his face contorted with rage. Gregory locking the door, leaving the child in darkness for hours. But the worst was the audio of Gregory on the phone, laughing. "No, the kid's a write-off," he was saying to some unknown person. "But the life insurance policy on Elena, plus the trust fund he inherits, that's the real prize. I just have to manage the asset until he's 18, or until he has an accident. The thinner he is, the more believable an illness becomes." It was the smoking gun, a confession of intent, cold and clear. The final piece of evidence was Leo himself. In the quiet safety of the penthouse, Marcus had given him paper and crayons. The boy drew picture after picture, a big, smiling sun, a house with a flower. Then, he drew a small boy inside a cage, and a tall, dark figure standing outside holding a stick. It was a child's simple, devastating indictment. The next morning, Marcus sat across from Evelyn Reed in her minimalist downtown office. Evelyn was his chief counsel, a woman whose intellect was as sharp as the crease in her trousers. She had navigated hostile takeovers and international trade disputes for him for years. Her expression was grim as she finished reviewing the file Marcus had prepared. A transcript of Mrs. Gable's statement, copies of Elena's diary pages, the chilling financial projections Gregory had made, and a thumb drive containing the teddy bear camera footage. "This is monstrous," she said, her voice stripped of its usual corporate detachment. She pushed her glasses up her nose and looked at Marcus. "The DA will have a field day with this. We can have him arrested within the hour." "No," Marcus said quietly. "An arrest is too clean, too private. A man like Gregory thrives in the shadows and feeds on lies. I want his world to end in the light, where everyone can see him for what he is." He leaned forward. "He's hosting the annual Starlight Foundation Gala for underprivileged children in 2 days. He's the chairman. He's going to give a speech about the importance of protecting the vulnerable." A humorless smile touched Marcus's lips. "That's where—" "We'll do it." Evelyn's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed in understanding. "A public execution. I like it. It's high risk, Marcus. He could have you thrown out for trespassing." "He can try," Marcus replied. He then made another call, this one to a man named Jax, a former member of his Special Forces unit who now ran the most effective private security firm in the world. Jax was the man you called when rules were obstacles, not boundaries. "Jax, I need a stage managed," Marcus said, pacing the length of Evelyn's office. "Grand ballroom, the Starlight Gala. I need control of the audio-visual systems. I need a clear path to the podium. And I need to ensure that when the police are called, they are the right police, not some beat cops who can be bought off by a smooth-talking chairman." "Consider it done, M," Jax's voice crackled back, calm and competent. "You want a spotlight? I'll give you a supernova. Who's the target?" "His name is Gregory Stowe," Marcus said, "and he's about to have a very bad night." He hung up and looked at Evelyn. "He'll try to spin this. He'll say I'm a bitter, estranged brother-in-law trying to steal my nephew's inheritance." "Then we make sure the first stone we throw is one he can't dodge," Evelyn said, tapping the thumb drive. "We start with his own voice." The plan was set. It was cold, precise, and absolute. A corporate takeover, but the asset being acquired was a child's life, and the hostile party was about to be liquidated. Gregory was beginning to feel the walls close in. The boy was gone. Marcus Thorne, a man who was supposed to be a distant, shadowy myth, was now a very real and present threat. Gregory's calls to the penthouse went unanswered. He felt a prickle of sweat on his brow that had nothing to do with the summer heat. He was a master of control, but for the first time, he was not in charge. His first move was one of calculated offense. He called the police, his voice thick with practiced panic and concern. "My stepson Leo has been taken," he cried, "by his uncle Marcus Thorne. He's unstable. We haven't seen him in years. I'm worried for Leo's safety. He's a very sick boy." He gave them Marcus's name, knowing the police would run it and see the name of a reclusive billionaire. It was a perfect narrative, the wealthy, unhinged relative swooping in to disrupt a fragile family. He then called the board of the Starlight Foundation. "There may be a small disturbance at the gala," he said smoothly. "My brother-in-law is having some issues. If he appears, please have security escort him out quietly. It's a family matter." He was building a firewall of plausible deniability, painting Marcus as the aggressor. He felt the familiar surge of power return. He would handle this. He would weather this storm and emerge as the victim, the stoic caregiver beset by a madman. He straightened his tie, looked at his reflection in the mirror, and practiced his benevolent, concerned smile. The gala would be his stage to reassert his authority and goodness. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel was a sea of glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden light over the city's elite, who sipped champagne and made charitable pledges. On the stage, beneath a massive banner reading, "Starlight Foundation, a beacon of hope for every child," stood Gregory Stowe. He was radiant, soaking in the applause after a flowery introduction. Thank you," he began, his voice resonating with sincerity. "When I look out at all of you tonight, I don't just see donors, I see guardians, I see protectors. Like you, I believe that there is no duty more sacred than shielding a child from the darkness of this world." As he spoke, a side door opened. Marcus Thorne entered, not in a tuxedo, but in a simple dark suit. He was not alone. At his side, holding his hand, was Leo. The boy was clean, dressed in a soft sweater, but still painfully thin. He clung to Marcus's leg, his eyes wide as he took in the cavernous room. Jax's men, disguised as hotel staff and security, subtly cleared a path. All eyes turned to the unexpected arrivals. Gregory faltered, his speech dying on his lips. A flicker of pure panic crossed his face before being replaced by a mask of pained concern. "Marcus," he said into the microphone, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is neither the time nor the place. As you all can see, my troubled brother-in-law has brought my poor, sick son here. Security, could you please handle this discreetly?" Two of the hotel's actual security guards started forward, but were immediately and quietly blocked by two of Jax's much larger men. Marcus ignored them all, his focus entirely on the man on the stage. "You talk about protecting children, Gregory." Marcus's voice boomed, amplified by a system Jax's team had already commandeered. The room fell into a shocked silence. "Let's talk about how you protect Leo." "This is a private family matter," Gregory hissed, his composure cracking. "Is it?" Marcus countered, taking a step forward. He nodded to a technician in the back. Suddenly, Gregory's own voice filled the ballroom, crisp and clear from the high-end speakers. It was the audio from the teddy bear camera. "The kid's a write-off, but the life insurance policy on Elena, plus the trust fund he inherits, that's the real prize. The thinner he is, the more believable an illness becomes." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Faces turned from Marcus to Gregory, a sea of horrified, accusing stares. Gregory's face went sheet white. That's doctored. It's a fake. He's trying to frame me," he stammered. "Is this a fake?" Marcus asked, and the massive screens on either side of the stage, which moments before had been showing smiling children from the Foundation's ads, now flickered to life. They showed a photo. It was one of Leo's drawings. The small boy in the cage, the tall, dark figure with the stick standing outside. It was crude, childish, and more damning than any legal document. The crowd murmured, the sound growing into a low roar of outrage. Gregory looked wildly around, a cornered animal searching for an escape. He pointed a shaking finger at Marcus. "He's a liar. Ask the boy, Leo, tell them your uncle is lying." He was desperate, grasping at the one thing he thought he still controlled, the boy's silence. All eyes fell on the small child clinging to Marcus's leg. Marcus knelt down, shielding Leo from the stairs. "It's okay, Leo," he whispered. "You don't have to say anything." But Leo, feeling the solid presence of his uncle beside him, feeling safe for the first time in a year, looked up at the man on the stage. His small voice, barely a whisper but carried by the microphone on Marcus's lapel, cut through the silence. "He's a monster," Leo said, his voice clear and steady. "He hurt my mommy, and he locked me up." The confession, simple and utterly devastating, shattered the last of Gregory's facade. He let out a choked guttural sound and lunged for the side of the stage, but Jax's men were there to block his path. At the same moment, the main doors of the ballroom burst open, and uniformed police officers, led by a detective Evelyn had personally briefed, strode in. Gregory crumpled, a pathetic, sobbing heap on the stage, his tailored suit suddenly looking like a clown's costume. The beacon of hope had been exposed as the very darkness he claimed to fight. The fallout was immediate and absolute. The flashing lights of the police cars painted the Grand Hotel entrance in strobing hues of red and blue as Gregory, no longer sobbing but snarling with impotent rage, was led out in handcuffs. The city's elite, who had applauded him just minutes earlier, now turned their backs, their faces masks of disgust and betrayal. The cameras that had been there to document a night of philanthropy now captured the ignominious fall of a monster, broadcasting his ruin across every local news channel. Marcus shielded Leo from the chaotic scene, wrapping his jacket around the boy and guiding him swiftly through a private exit where his car was waiting. The drive back to the penthouse was silent. Leo had fallen asleep in the back seat, his small hand still loosely clutching the fabric of Marcus's trousers. The tension of the past few days finally began to recede from Marcus's shoulders, replaced by a profound, aching weariness and a quiet, fierce sense of victory. Justice had been served not just legally, but morally. Gregory hadn't just been arrested, he had been unmade. His identity, built on a foundation of lies and polished cruelty, had been publicly dismantled. In the weeks that followed, the legal proceedings were swift. Faced with the irrefutable video evidence, the diary, Mrs. Gable's testimony, and damning financial records showing he had been embezzling from Leo's trust fund since Elena's death, Gregory's defense crumbled. He pleaded guilty to charges of child endangerment, abuse, and fraud, hoping for a lighter sentence. The judge, a stern woman who had watched the teddy bear footage in her chambers, was unmoved. She sentenced him to the maximum term, her voice ringing with contempt as she spoke of his unfathomable depravity and betrayal of the most sacred trust. The Starlight Foundation was disbanded, its name forever tainted. Marcus, with Evelyn's help, formally adopted Leo. The court process was a formality. He was family. He sold the penthouse and liquidated his holdings in the city, severing the last ties to a place that held too many ghosts. He bought a house by the sea, a place of wide open skies and the constant cleansing sound of the waves. It was a house with big windows, no locks on the bedroom doors, and a yard where a boy could play freely. The house on the coast was filled with light. Sunshine streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the specks of dust dancing in the air. It smelled of salt and clean linen. Months had passed. Leo was no longer skeletal. His cheeks were full, his laughter, once a foreign sound, now echoed through the halls. He was still quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet, not a fearful one. One afternoon, Marcus was in his study when Leo came in, holding a piece of paper. He held it out to Marcus. It was a new drawing. On one side stood a small boy with a bright yellow sun over his head. On the other stood a tall man. Both were smiling, and between them, their hands were joined. Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with his wealth or his power. It was the feeling of being needed, the feeling of home. He looked at Leo, who gave him a small, trusting smile, and pulled him into a gentle hug. It was the first time the boy had initiated the embrace. In this world, evil often wears a handsome mask, speaking in tones of reason and concern. It builds pristine facades to hide the rot within, counting on our reluctance to look too closely, to question the polished surface. It preys on the silent, the small, the ones who cannot speak for themselves, believing their voices will never be heard. But what happens when one person refuses to look away? What happens when a quiet, unwavering goodness decides to meet that hidden evil, not with rage, but with relentless, unshakable truth? True strength is not the power to dominate, but the will to protect. It is the courage to enter the forgotten locked rooms and give voice to the silent victims huddled in the dark. It is the proof that a single, steady light, focused and determined, can utterly destroy the deepest shadows. For every child like Leo, there is a protector waiting, a person whose own broken past has forged in them an unbreakable resolve to shield the innocent. The greatest victory is not in the fall of the wicked, but in the first, hesitant smile of a child who is finally learning to feel safe. What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever witnessed a situation where someone stood up for a person who couldn't defend themselves? We would be deeply grateful to hear your stories in the comments below. Thank you for reading, and may we all find the courage to be a light in someone's darkness.